Hello pen friends, Brian Goulet here of GouletPens.com, and it's episode number 254 of Goulet Q&A, and today I'm going to talk to you about giving pens to experienced pen friends of yours, the best way to get into the pen business, and finding inspiration to write again when you feel like you've lost it, among other things. So let's get into it this week, shall we? First off, a little personal stuff. Rachel celebrated her birthday last week. I alluded to that in Q&A. Her parents came into town. We did some family stuff. Nothing too crazy or exciting. Honestly, sometimes Rachel and I, when we have like milestone type things, we actually just kind of want to chill. So we like went out to dinner and did the whole thing, but we really just kind of chilled hard. Spent some family time with the kids and all that, and that was really nice. So that was mostly what that was all about. I was going to, the weather was really nice. I was going to take my mountain bike out. I haven't ridden the mountain bike in a while, normally a road biker. And in my driveway, as I was just testing out to like, hey, how do the brakes work, the shifters, all this kind of stuff, I slipped on, there's freaking pollen around here is so bad. There's literally like a layer of pollen in sections of our driveway that has not yet washed off. And yeah, it was a little bit wet and it created like this slurry, and my bike tire just slid out from under me and gave me a little boo-boo. I'll be perfectly fine, except, you know, I look like I've, you know, needed some repair. So it's fine. I'll really be okay. And, you know, but definitely threw me for a loop a little bit, a little on the personal front. You know, 35 now, which is not old, but certainly is not 22 like I used to be. So my recovery time is taking what it takes. That's fine. So I'm just playing with pens in the meantime. Other things that are going on, a lot of pen stuff that's happened in the last week. Got some new pens that I'll show you just kind of briefly. I'm going to try and move through Q&A at a good pace today. Try and add some value into your life without taking up unnecessary time. So first off, we have Nattuno, which I haven't really talked about a whole lot. I've mentioned a couple times in Q&A, mainly when people have been like, how come you never talk about Nattuno? So there's one new color that came out, a blue and white. This is an old like Delta style box. For those of you who don't know, Nino Marino is a former founder of Delta, and he's behind Nattuno. So if you're seeing similar elements there, that's probably why. But anyway, so really nice looking blue and white pen. We've been waiting for this one for a little bit, finally came in. Nattuno is new and they're still kind of coming into their own. They're really in kind of startup phase, but they're producing some really nice stuff. I got to see them in Naples when I went there last September, got to meet the people, super nice people, really knowledgeable, a lot of handwork involved with making all these pens, and they look really nice. In particular, this blue one. I'm probably just really partial to blue, but it's a really nice pen. Not super cheap, not like an intro level pen, but I would say if you are an experienced kind of pen person and you want to kind of support more of an upstart brand that I think has some legs to it over time. They're not growing at like breakneck speed. It's going to take a while. We've had some stock issues and stuff, but I'm behind the people that are making this pen, and I think they're, for the long term, going to be a relevant pen company. So that's kind of why we're one of the select retailers that even carries Nattuno. But this in particular is a really nice looking pen. So $316 for this particular pen is what we have it for. Extra fine through broad nibs, stainless steel nibs, and it's got a matte and polished kind of two-tone look. Looks really nice. Standard international cartridge converter pen, and it's going to be a regular edition, but though they are individually numbered, so they're kind of doing that just like Delta used to. Another pen that came in, this is actually one of Rachel's new faves, Pelikan M600, white and purple. She's really pretty pleased with this one. Of course, she has the M600 broad nib is kind of like one of her favorite nibs of all time, and she loves purple. So she was pretty excited about this pen. She's not like super into white, and she also doesn't necessarily love gold trim the most, but still she's very happy with how this pen has turned out. So I'm kind of speaking through proxy for her. She loves the broad nib, very smooth nibs, nice wet writer. She loves that. 14 karat nib. It's got a little bit of bounce to it, nothing crazy. It's not like a soft flex nib or anything like that. It's really nice packaging too. I would say, like, if you're looking for a really high-end like gift pen, graduation gift, or you know, something like that, a milestone gift of some kind for somebody that loves purple, this definitely presents really nicely. So this could be an option for you. $440, and it's a piston filler, and also is hard to get back into the box. There we go. Beautiful. What else we got? Diplomat. So the Diplomat Volute. Diplomat's got kind of a cool box, nice metal lid. Ooh, that's really loud, sorry. So this is a limited edition, one of 1,000 worldwide that they're doing. So this is the Volute, and this is a hydro dipping process that they use for this material. So this is actually a kind of a coating, if you will. You can look up hydro dipping on YouTube. We have a video on our product page that shows the process in general, not for this pen specifically, but in general what it is. So they basically take a Diplomat Arrow, which is this kind of Zeppelin style pen, and they have this, I don't know, basically film, for lack of a better term, and it's got a pattern to it on top of water, and then they dip the pen parts down into the water, and the film kind of wraps itself around the pen and creates this really interesting pattern on top of the metal. So it's a very unique pattern design, and then it's something that's kind of unique to the pen world. Haven't really seen this done before. So it's really interesting. It does leave, just because of the process, it does leave kind of a line, because basically what happens is when they dip it, the film kind of wraps around the material and then it clasps onto itself. So it ends up with sort of a line like right here, where you can see a little bit of a break in the pattern. That's completely normal. And then there's like little parts here and there where there's a little bit of gray or white, or a little part that kind of overlaps in there. That's also normal, just in case you see it and you're like, this isn't flawless. Like, well, this is kind of how the design of the pen ends up being. It's almost like, I mean, the pattern even looks a little marbled, but it's almost like kind of a fingerprint for every pen. So each one is going to be a little bit unique, and it's a unique process for the pen that they're doing in a limited edition. I think they are thinking maybe down the road of doing this in other colors and stuff. I don't have any guarantees of that, but I imagine with a new process like this, if it ends up being popular, they may want to expand that. So it could be interesting. It's a little more of a premium over the regular Arrow. You're looking $236 instead of $156 for that with a steel nib, or you can get it with a gold nib option for, you know, about $125 more if you're so inclined to do that. But they've got that option for you. So that's pretty cool. And then Aurora, I'll show this briefly because I don't know how much longer we're going to have this. We only have a couple of these, but this is a limited edition. This is their 100th anniversary. They're doing a dozen different 100th, or 10 or 12 different, 10, I can't even keep track of them anymore. But they're doing a number of different 100th anniversary pens called Cento in their Cento series. This is the 88 Cento, and it is a rose gold pen, and it's even got rose gold hinges on the box, which I think is so cool. Glad they had that nice little touch there. But anyway, it's basically an all metal pen. It's not like super heavy, because I think, if I'm not mistaken, that it's actually metal over resin. They've done this on a couple of their pens before, but it makes it really nice because it's got that metal feel to it, and the rose gold obviously bling that it has. But it's not a super heavy pen, so it's gonna be a good daily writer, and it's got the resin grip as well. So if you like the look of a metal pen but don't like the weight necessarily, or don't like the slipperiness of the grip, this could be a good one for you. So I like that. The one thing that definitely stands out, so I'll point it out, is the rose gold on the nib is definitely like darker and redder than what you have on the trim. You can see it in our pictures. We tried to represent that well. It's just kind of the way that it turned out. But anyway, that's a thing. It's 18 karat gold nib with rose gold, 18 karat rose gold nib. And then it's got a piston filler on here too. So solid pen, really nice looking. 88 is definitely an underrated pen, I think. And if you're an Aurora fan, Aurora collector, that one's definitely worth considering, because it's nothing that I think you're gonna see available too much elsewhere. And then I don't have this one to show you on hand. I didn't grab one, but the Peniter Honeycomb Prince Quill is a new Peniter pen that's come out. The honeycomb has been available in clear previously, but now it's got a black resin, which has the honeycomb look, and then it's got a rose gold trim. So the black and rose gold thing is like spot on. It looks really good. And from what I understand, part of the motivation in doing that black is they could actually put some stuff in there to make the material a little stronger too. So that honeycomb pattern, it's a bit challenging in terms of how do you strengthen that material when it's literally filled with holes. But they have strengthened that material, so it should be a little more solid, which is pretty exciting. And the design is not going to be for everyone, but I think it's pretty solid. And that pen is going to be 638. And then we have 2 other new pens that are worth mention, which I talked about in Right Now on Monday, so I won't get into it too much. But we have 2 new Edisons that are going to be regular editions. These are Edison Nouveau Premiers, so they're exclusive to us, and they are Delphinium, which used to be a 2017 summer edition, and we brought it back. I'm so pumped because I think we had this thing available for a total of 9 days over the season that this was available, because we ran out of stock. We sold out so quickly. So bringing it back now, very, very pumped for that, because it is my favorite premiere that we've ever done. And then the Smoke and Mirrors, which is new. We've never had this before. This gray, kind of smoky with white, lots of pearlescence. Very cool. So we went, a little more subtle on the colors. We're sunsetting the Cherry Blossom and Caribbean Sea. And so those ones, we still have some, so you can still get those if you want them, but we are not going to have those as regular editions. We've had them for probably 2 years or so. So we're going to sunset those, bring these in as regular editions, see how popular they are. Eventually we may sunset these too, I don't know, but for the foreseeable future we're going to have these, and we have it along with the Cappuccino, which has been around ever since the inception of the premiere. So anyway, so those are pretty exciting. We got some new ink, Robert Oster Crimson Blood, a couple other products that you may see around, but definitely subscribe to our newsletter if you haven't already, because you get all the latest and greatest information on there. And then this coming weekend is going to be a 3-day weekend. We are going to be closed on Monday for Memorial Day, so just be ready for that on May 28th. We are doing something special to honor our veterans. So we are giving an extra discount. We have a regular standing 5% discount for active duty veterans. And so there's a process for doing that. You can check it out on our site. There's a process. You have your information, you enter it in, it verifies, and all that kind of stuff. But we're doing 10% for this weekend for servicemen and women and their spouses. So that's kind of cool. You can get more details on that. We're going to send out an email with more details on that. And you can see there's going to be a banner on our site throughout the whole weekend with more details about how to do that. So we're not going to have Right Now publishing on Monday because we're not shooting one because we're closed. But anyway, so our office will be closed through Monday, 3-day weekend, but we'll be back up to speed after that. So special thank you to all of our servicemen and women for service to our country. So thank you very much. And now I will provide a very different, less noble type of service to you in answering your pen questions. Okay, so starting out with pen and writing questions, this is from Akbajaj on Instagram, and this is, while traveling to a different country, can we pre-fill our pens with ink or carry our ink and fill it there? Which is the best solution, and if any advantages or disadvantages of doing any of these things? So I've gotten questions before about traveling with pens and flying, all that kind of stuff. Never really gotten questions about pre-filling or not. So definitely, you're traveling to a different country. As far as flying regulations, like TSA regulations and type of stuff, or whatever governing body there might be in whatever countries that you're flying to, nowhere that I've ever flown has it been a problem to have really a fountain pen of any kind, let alone having it filled with ink or not. There's never been any kind of issue that I've been aware of. Now, of course, it's always going to be able to vary a little bit, maybe depending on where it is you're traveling and what the restrictions are. But as far as I'm aware, there's not a problem with flying with a fountain pen basically anywhere. I would just kind of take that into account. Maybe if you're very concerned, keep it in your check bag so it's not an issue. And don't carry it on if you're really that worried about it. I've carried on 30 pens at a time, and people might look at me and be like, whoops, why do you have so many pens? And I'm like, well, I sell pens. And they're like, oh, whatever, okay. And they kind of go on. But it's never really been an issue. And certainly the inked or not has never been an issue. Really, I've got a couple of videos on flying with pens. You can either keep them completely empty, completely filled. You're going to be in good shape. I'll intentionally try to get my pens to leak on a plane, and it's actually surprisingly difficult. You can do it with certain pens. If you have a very large ink capacity with just a little bit of ink in there and it's a lot of air, and you have the pen laying down sideways or upside down, you might be able to get a little bit of a leak. But that's on any plane. That's not specific to traveling to a different country or anything like that. Honestly, I think it depends on, are you going to be refilling this? Is it something you're just going to be traveling for a few days, and so you have a couple of different pens, or you're going to need to refill it a lot? You're probably going to be fine just with the ink that's in the pen, but it might be good to carry, maybe a traveling ink pot, or an ink sample filled with extra ink, or maybe a plastic bottle like a Robert Oster or a Diamond 30 ml or something like that. Those can be helpful when you're traveling somewhere. Honestly, 30 milliliters of ink is going to be enough to last you so long. Me personally, when I travel with my pens, I bring like one bottle of ink. I don't bring 5 different colors of ink. I might ink up some pens with different colors so that I have variety if I want it, but I'll only bring like maybe 1 bottle of ink with me, if that. Maybe just a traveling, either a Visconti traveling inkwell or the Peniter pen filler. Those are really handy. Carry 6 to 10 milliliters of ink. That's plenty. That's plenty whenever you're traveling. At most, I've needed to refill my pen just a couple of times, but you'll be in pretty good shape. So, at most, the biggest disadvantage that you'll have when flying with a pen that's got ink in it is it might leak a little bit. So as long as if you're really worried about it, you can keep it in a Ziploc bag, or you can check it or whatever, and just minimize that if it were to happen. But honestly, I hear about it happening so little. I think you can just do whatever is going to make you happy in your travels and cause you the least amount of stress, and then rock on. Cool? All right, devnnluu on Instagram. In last week's Q&A, you gave suggestions on what to gift beginner fountain pen users. Do you have any thoughts on what to gift a fountain pen veteran? I realize that personal taste will come into play, but I would appreciate any suggestions. Thanks in advance for considering my question. For sure. So yeah, this is interesting, coming off of last week, not newbies, but we're talking about Memorial Day here, not like actual service veterans, but we're talking about somebody who has a lot of pens and maybe knows about them a lot, right? So this gets a little bit tougher giving the pens. I mean, as it is with anybody who gets into any kind of a niche hobby. My father-in-law is building model trains. It's pretty difficult to buy him something for his model trains because he knows exactly what he wants. Well, I mean, we can buy it. We basically just have to say, what's this one train? Give me a link. Give me a hyperlink to what you want, and I will buy it for your birthday or whatever it is. But it's really hard to surprise someone, I should say, who's got a very specific taste and is really into a niche hobby. And fountain pens are no exception to that. So for me, you got to get into a little bit of reconnaissance here if you're willing to do that. There's a couple of reasons why it's tougher. Their tastes get more specific for colors, materials, nib size, brand, all that kind of stuff. Their tastes may get more costly if they have a lot of pens and they know what they like, and they're getting up into like the Pelican range and all that kind of stuff. You're like, ooh, okay, I don't know if I can get into that. And that's fine. They already might have a lot more pen stuff, so the risk of duplicating something they already have gets a lot greater. So reconnaissance is always really helpful, and asking them about it. The nice thing about fountain pen people is you can pretty much walk up to anybody that's into fountain pens, start asking them about their pens or talking to them about pens, and they will be generous enough to share what they know because it's a passion thing for a lot of us, right? Even somebody who's really introverted, you start asking them about their pens and probably they're going to open up and start talking about it a little bit. So it's pretty easy to get into that conversation. Don't make it super obvious, like, what's the next fountain pen you're going to buy if their birthday is like a week away, right? So maybe they'll kind of figure that out. But they're probably going to love to talk about the pens. So you could slip into the conversation like, what do you have your eye on right now? Or specifics about pens that they already have, maybe what they love about them and why, and you could kind of piece together maybe some of that. If you yourself know a bit about pens and you don't want to tip them onto what you're trying to do too much, you can just ask them if they have some of their pens out, be like, oh, what do you like about this one or that one or the other, and if they're like, oh yeah, I really love broad nibs, I'm really getting into them now, I don't have that many, but I'm going to explore them more, you can be like, okay, maybe I'll see what kind of broad nib options there are, that kind of thing. Something that's a limited edition or a special edition might be appealing, because it's, even if it's not like dead on something that they would want, the fact that it's not going to be available that long, maybe they wouldn't have bought it for themselves, but knowing that it's kind of unique or harder to find or some exclusive at a certain retailer could be kind of interesting to them and show that like you're thinking of them. And then, they might have a wish list. A lot of different, retail sites have wish list options, or, some sort of registry function, something like that, where they probably are putting, pens in their cart or compiling a wish list of some kind. Maybe they'd be cool sharing it with you. That takes away a little bit of the surprise factor, but then you would definitely know what they're super into. Or you could get away from the pen thing altogether. maybe not all together, but don't buy them a pen and get them something to complement it, like a nice notebook or an ink or something like that that might complement it. If they have, you know, an ink collection, you can kind of scope it out and see what's similar. Maybe you could do that. Or if they have an ink that they really love and they're really low, you could get them a replenishment. The nice thing about inks and notebooks and stuff like that, even if it's kind of close or something like they already have, they're going to use it up eventually. So then they can put yours next in the rotation and be thinking of you as they use their gift. And then lastly, if you're just like, this is way too much, I don't know this person that well or have the capacity to absorb this much about pen information, gift credit is always an option for somebody who's really into pen things. I don't think anybody's, you know, generally speaking, going to be incredibly offended if you say, I know you really love pens and now you can shop and get what you want, or I know you've had your eye on this, it's not available yet, so I couldn't buy it for you, but, you know, print out a picture of whatever thing that hasn't been released yet and say, here's whatever $50 towards the thing that I know you're saving up for, and they'd probably appreciate that pretty much. So those are my ideas about shopping for a pen veteran. Hopefully that can help you out. All right, floridafour on Instagram asks, is it best to express air out of a TWSBI Eco or 580 as the ink is used, or just leave the air pocket? Seems like a dumb question, but I've recently heard that the twist knob has a pressure lock at the full position. Okay, I don't know about pressure lock necessarily. I think I know what you're talking about. This is TWSBI 580 ALR. I've inked it up and using it right now. So yes, same concept here as a regular 580. Eco is maybe a little bit different. I think I got an Eco right here. Okay, so cool, I can show you those. Anyway, so when you have, you know, a fountain pen filled with any kind of ink, you're gonna have some kind of air bubble at the top here. Unless you've just recently filled it to its maximum capacity and haven't really used it yet, you're gonna have some kind of air pocket in here. That's okay, that's perfectly normal. Ink flows by capillary action. So really the only thing that needs to happen with a properly functioning pen is the ink has to be able to make contact with the back of the feed that runs through the grip of the pen, and that feed will draw the ink through by capillary action and to the nib, and it writes on the page. You don't have to worry about how much ink is in here or how much air is in here. It's going to write, really should write the same as if it's completely full as if it's really close to the bottom, with the rare exception if you have an eyedropper pen and it's like a really huge ink capacity and you have just a little bit of ink left in there, you could get a little bit of burping and stuff like that. But that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about TWSBI 580 situation. So ink capacity is pretty good size, but not big enough where it should really cause you any of the burping problems you might have in a larger eyedropper. You do not need to touch the piston on the back in order to do it, to force ink down or anything like that. Unless maybe you really want to, if you're using a shimmering ink and you really want to bring the shimmer out like crazy, you can purposefully like draw down more ink and force it through the feed to make it write wetter than it would normally if you force that down. But for the sake of kind of what you're talking about, do you need to like turn it upside down and expel the air pocket out the top? Let me see if I can do this without splattering ink all over myself. Okay, so I'm going to do that. I'm twisting the piston knob to expel all the air out. Cool. Okay, so now there's no air left, right? So you're seeing it's completely inked. But now the problem is the filler knob is loose. It's just loose sitting right there. And on a pen like the 580, technically TWSBI says it's non-postable, but people post it all the time. So I'm going to tell you like people actually use it. So TWSBI's official thing will say they didn't design the pen to be postable, but it'll definitely grab onto the back of that filler knob. The problem is with a loose filler knob like this cap can flop all around like this. And if you have it on the filler knob and then you bump with a clip especially, it can force that piston to go down and dump ink. It doesn't happen a lot, but the potential is certainly there. So what you're talking about here is that pressure lock thing. Yeah, if you go back the other way and I have it at the full position up here, because that filler knob is rotating and twisting itself into the body of the pen, that's now gripped onto here. I'm now going to, if I want to, I can post it and it's nice and secure here. I don't really have to worry about it coming undone. So that's the advantage and really the design behind the TWSBI 580 being like that, is that it allows it to kind of lock in place through tension and be secure on the back of that, and you don't really have to worry about it. So basically you don't really have to do anything other than fill the pen, clean it with regular maintenance, and then write with it and enjoy it. You don't have to really worry about anything else unless, again, you want to force the ink down through. And the Eco is in the same situation. It's a similar piston mechanism on the Eco. The only difference to what I just said on the 580 is on the Eco is the Eco, the grip portion of the cap when you post it actually goes around this O-ring that's on the body of the pen and doesn't touch that filler knob. So you can post it and it's more secure with that O-ring, and it doesn't matter at what state that filler knob is because it's kind of loose if it's halfway down. Well, you can put it back on there and it doesn't really matter because it's not touching that filler knob. So that's the only difference there. But still, you don't need to go through all that, and the filler knob is still going to be loose on the back. So just keep it locked in place there, and you're going to be just fine. Cool. All right. Goulet 123 on Instagram. Goulet? I don't know. We'll see. Hey Brian, I'm looking for a great work pen that is a gold nib, large ink capacity, ideally a piston fill. Pilot Custom A23 versus Pelikan M800 is what I was thinking. Any other suggestions? If not, between those two, what would you suggest? Okay, so I will talk about those two, but you asked me for other things first, so I will give you my other suggestions. Lamy 2000 has got to be in the mix. Doesn't have a huge ink capacity, it's like 1.5 mil, but it's definitely a decent amount of ink. I would consider that one to be in the mix there, and it's a lower price than the other two, so and it's one of my favorite pens. So definitely consider that one. Pelikan has some good options for you that are in other sizes. Maybe the M800 is all that you have awareness of, and there might be some other size that you're interested in. There's an M400, 600, 1000. They all have gold nibs. They're all different sizes, so basically the bigger the number, the bigger the pen and the bigger the nib. So that's something to consider. I think the M600, the M600 is probably generally the most popular because it's a little less expensive than the M800, and it tends to be, it's a little smaller, so it tends to be more universal for people of all hand sizes. And they also come out with a lot of colors of the M600. So the M800 is one of my favorite sizes personally. And the M800 has some internal metal components, which, make it more durable and stuff like that. But it makes it a little weightier too. So some people, the M800 is just a little too heavy. So they like the M600 for that reason. It's totally fine. It's purely a matter of personal preference. But the M600 should be in the mix there. The Visconti Homo sapiens, I don't know if you would consider that in here. Technically, I included that because you said you wanted ideally a piston fill, but you threw the Custom 823 in there. That's a vacuum fill. So I threw another vacuum fill in there, which is the Homo sapiens. Definitely, it's not a gold nib per se, it's a palladium nib. It performs very similar to a gold nib, so I would kind of throw it in the mix there along with it. I think that's a worthy pen, more comparable in price and features of the M800. Big fan of the Homo sapiens. I like the size, the weight of it definitely. It's a little bit bigger pen than, well, it's pretty comparable in size, I guess, to the M800 and the Custom 823, so it would be right in there. But I love that pen. Another one that, the Opera Master too, I guess I would throw in there. It's going to be bigger and even heavier, so I don't know if you consider that in there, but if I'm talking about the Homo sapiens, might as well throw the Visconti Opera Master in there too. There's some fun options in there. The Aurora 88, or maybe the Optima, it's another piston filler that sometimes gets overshadowed, but they're really solid writing pens, and have a decent ink capacity. Nice writing nibs. Nibs are a little stiffer on those pens than maybe on your Pelikan or on your Viscontis, but very solid performing and some interesting options there in terms of colors and things like that. So yeah, those are some of my alternate options that I may have for you in that like piston vac range. But going back to what you specifically asked for, which is the Custom 823 and the M800, big fan of both. Well, 800, 805, 815, something in that range. All kind of similar pens. It's just a matter of trim and certain other features that are different. But that M800 series is what I'm considering here. So Custom 823 is going to be far less expensive. It's going to be about half the price of an M800, which You can't ignore that. It's a thing to consider, but maybe that's not the biggest deal breaker for you. They both post really solidly. They're both nice, balanced, nice writing pens. I'm a big fan of both. The nibs are similar in size to each other, so aesthetically you're getting kind of a similar vibe. You get some translucency here on the Custom 823, so you can see your ink capacity. You don't always have that on the M800. With the regular one, you get that a little bit because it's got those stripes and you can kind of see the ink level through it. Certain other ones may be more translucent than others. You know, this is the Ocean one that came out last year, but it's not available anymore. So, sorry to bring it up. I do love this color though, Ocean Swirl. So this one, you can't check the ink capacity on it. So that's kind of a bummer. This one you can. The nice thing about the Custom 823, it has a higher ink capacity than the M800 does because it's a vac filler, and you can really fill this sucker out, especially if you have something like the Pineider pen filler or the Visconti traveling inkwell. You can actually tip those things upside down, fill them completely, and you can get like almost 3 milliliters of ink on this thing. That's a lot of ink. And because it's a vacuum filler, it actually locks off, and so you can write with it for a bit, and then open it up, write with it again. You don't have to deal with the burping issues that you would if you had an eyedropper pen that was filled to this capacity. Or if you're traveling with it and there's altitude changes and stuff, this thing locks off. The downside of that is because it locks off, that means if you write with it for extended periods, you have to undo that and allow more ink to flow through. So it's another thing to think about, I guess. You know, if you don't want to have to think about that, that's fine. You can get a piston filler like the M800 and you just fill it and then the ink just goes through over time and you don't have to worry about doing anything with the knob. Nice thing about the knob, they were thoughtful about that when they designed the pen. So the filler knob can be open like this if you want to write for a long writing session, and the cap still posts onto the back of the body of the pen, doesn't mess with that knob, so you can keep it open, keep it writing, and all that kind of stuff. So I know that there's a lot of fans behind the Custom 823, and it's a pen that's really picked up a lot of popularity in the last couple of years. M800 has always been a good standby. Nice writing pens. You get some nice nib options on both. If you like really fine nibs, the Custom 823 is going to be more the way to go because Pilot, they're a Japanese company, they grind finer nibs than Pelikan does out of Germany. So even if you get an extra fine on your M800, it's maybe going to be comparable to a fine on your Custom 823. And if you go for something like an extra fine, you can get even finer. And the fine probably in some cases will be even finer than your extra fine M800. So definitely something to consider there. The Japanese definitely know how to do fine nibs, and that's pretty awesome. So it'll largely come down to personal preference, how many of these features matter, the color options and these types of things, but both are wildly popular pens, very, very solid pens, great writing pens for none of them are like a value pen, so to speak. They're definitely kind of more in that premium range. It's not like the first pen that somebody's most likely going to go out and buy, but pretty much most everybody that gets them is really happy with them and uses them for a long time. So I think they're going to be both worthy considerations along with a lot of the other ones I mentioned here for you. All right, Cruelty-Free Musings on Instagram asked, do you recommend that fountain pen newbies try a variety of nib sizes? How would you recommend balancing the various considerations of price, quality, and not knowing yet what you like? For example, I'm considering a Faber-Castell Loom in broad because I've heard they're particularly nice broad nibs, but in general my wish list is a giant list of fine and extra fine nibs because I never know what pens would be good to try with broader nibs. Okay, that's fair. So I'm a huge advocate for, especially when you're in the beginning and just starting out, of getting as many different nib sizes as you can because you don't know what you like yet. I mean, practically speaking, extra fine and fine nibs are going to be a little safer to use on paper that you have no idea what the quality is going to be with a fountain pen. So it's a little bit of a safer buy. I think if you're really strapped for cash or you're trying to ease into the hobby, really, going with something more like an extra fine or fine is a much safer bet. If you're looking to go broader, it does get a little bit more speculative. And because broad nibs are not as popular, you know, especially in the US, they are not as available on as many pens, especially on as many starter pens. So you're going to usually end up having to pay a little bit more to try out some of the broad nibs. kind of stinks, but that's a little bit of what we're dealing with here. So knowing exactly which nib to try can be a little bit tricky, because honestly there are some subtle differences between all the different brands and different pen companies. Sometimes it's a little bit like, you know, women's dress sizes, where it's like there's an approximate between an 8 and a 10 and all that, but it varies by the brand, and sometimes it might fit in one place, not another. And it's kind of like that a little bit. You know, sometimes, especially with a broad nib, you got a big old glob of material that's welded onto the tip of that nib, and then how they shape it. Some broad nibs are a little more stubby, some are a little more perfectly round. It gets really, really difficult to say exactly how every single one is, and you can really dissect them. But anyway, so there's not a good super cheap way to try all the different nib sizes, at least not in one pen model or brand, going from like extra fine through broad and all that. And when I say super cheap, I mean it's not like you can buy a set for $10 and try every single nib size, because nibs are, you know, they're a little bit of work to create, and so you're not going to be able to get anything for more than a little bit of an investment to try so many nibs. But I'm going to do my best. I went through our whole catalog and put all my brain power together and said, okay, let me think, if I was starting out in the beginning, what would be a good example of trying out some different nib sizes for a pretty economical way with some pens that I think I could hang on to for a little bit and get a really good writing experience, at least, and then kind of go with it. So I have done that in the most economical way possible, and I'll give you that list today and show you the pens. So the first off, the one I have is an extra fine, and this is the jhns Shark pen. So this is a $4 pen, and it comes with a converter. You're not going to be able to beat this for the money, quite honestly, and it's actually a pretty solid performing pen. Now, is it the finest extra fine you can get? No, but it's going to give you a pretty good representation of a pretty darn extra fine line for hardly any money. So that is definitely worth consideration, and it's just a fun looking pen. jhns Shark. Going to a fine nib, of course you have a lot of different options. I went with the TWsbi Go. Of course you could go with an Eco or something like that, but the Go is like a good $10 less, so $9 less. So I chose a fine nib on the TWsbi Go. It's a cool piston pen that has this fun kind of spring mechanism in the back. It may look a little childish for you, and that's fine. That's where you can go with the Eco if you want, but that's close to $30, and that might be a lot just to try out a fine nib. So you could try that. Of course, TWsbi has an extra fine. They have fine, medium, broad, so you could stick just with the Go, and you could get all those nib sizes if you wanted to. But then you have like 4 different Go's. I don't know if that's something you want, but that's an option. What else we got? The Pilot Varsity. So this is a medium only, and it's a pre-filled pen. Now technically you can refill it if you yank the thing out, fill it like an eyedropper pen, and stick it back in there. It's a bit of a deep dive for most fountain pen people, but it's a really inexpensive medium nib. You know, you're talking like just over $3. It's tough to beat, and it's actually a surprisingly decent medium nib writer. So it can at least give you a good example of what a medium nib is. It comes pre-filled with ink, so that's pretty rad. So you can check that out. Going to a broad nib, I selected the Diplomat Magnum. Now, honestly, you can, for the price, the Magnum and the Go are pretty similar. You could switch between the TWsbi Go and the Magnum for the broad and the fine, and that's perfectly okay. These other two, they're only available in these nib sizes, so you got to kind of fill in the gaps. So that's where these two come in. I did the Diplomat broad because I like the way the broad writes. Honestly, I like the way the TWsbi broad writes too. So you could, these are really kind of interchangeable, but I personally selected the broad on this one, the Prismatic Purple. Pretty cool, good nib, good color choices, and a decent writing experience, honestly. So that's kind of cool. So you can check that out. That one's just over $20, $22. If you want to get a stub nib writing experience, one of the most economical ways to do that is the Pilot Plumix. Now this uses the same nib style as what's on the Pilot Metropolitan, as well as the Prera, as well as the penmanship, and some other things that Pilot has. So you can swap these if you are so inclined. They don't sell the nibs separately, but if you were to go more the route of a Pilot Metropolitan, Pilot Metropolitan is in that just a little over $20 range, which you could certainly go with that for a fine nib, and then you could go with this on a broad or whatever. So there's other options here, you know, and then you could switch between your Plumix and your Metropolitan. But anyway, I digress. So this is a 1.0 millimeter stub nib. So this would give you a little bit of an idea of kind of that line variation between the cross-stroke and the downstroke. You could at least test that out on a sub $10 pen. So not too bad, or it's around $10 there. And then let's say you want to try Flex as well. Flex is kind of a whole other thing, but if you want to try it out pretty economically, the Noodler's Nib Creeper. It's not my favorite pen of all time, but it is not a terrible writer for a starting out Flex pen. It's $14. It's pretty tough to beat. I like the Ahab a little more personally, but it's almost $10 more. So if you just want to try it out, this is not a terrible way to go. You know, another option too. So this is kind of the whole bunch, and you have color options and stuff like that between all these, of course. If you wanted to go a slightly different route, sometimes we don't always have these available, but sometimes we'll have a Monteverde Monza 3 pen set that's available. This is a blue one, which we actually don't have at the moment, but we have a clear one right now, and they kind of come and go in and out a little bit. But it's basically a pen set that comes with the pen itself with a fine, medium, and flex. So that can replace a couple of these other options. Now, you can't keep them all inked up and usable at one time. That's kind of the disadvantage of having a multi-nib set like this, because you basically have to swap out the grip with the rest of the pen. So there is that to consider. But for $24, it can replace 3 other pens potentially. So I like, you know, you can consider that in there, but I like kind of my standard set here offering of these ones that I had. I didn't actually add up the math of how much all this is, but just going it very quickly, you're looking at about $60, $65, $70 the most for 6 different pens, which is just not terrible, honestly. You get you some ink samples or maybe a bottle of ink, and you got a pretty solid start for a decent variety of some fairly reputable fountain pens. Now, of course, these are not going to be the cream of the crop of each of these nib sizes, but I'm trying to keep it economical here for you. Now, if you want to, there are other pens that you could certainly consider. Lamy has a good range of nib sizes. You can get one Lamy pen and get a variety of spare nibs and swap them in and out. That is certainly an option. You get something like a Safari for under $30. Each nib is 15-ish, so you can replace those. And for around that $70 range, you can get all those different nib experiences. Of course, it's still one pen. That's kind of the disadvantage. Or you could go kind of a similar route, go with like a Jhens X450 or 750, maybe a 159, something with a number 6 nib that you can pull out. Get Goulet replacement nibs, or maybe Noodlers or Goulet or some combination thereof. The Goulet nibs are $15 each, and you can get a decent number of spare nibs for that. You could skip medium because that's what comes on the Jhens. So kind of for around that total price range, you can get you know, all those nibs. Again, it's still kind of on one pen in that one. So you know, you mentioned the Loom. The Loom does have a nice writing broad nib, as does Lamy, as does TSB and Diplomat, and so I'm a fan of all these. I really haven't found a lot of broad nibs that I think don't write well, to be quite honest with you, because broad, basically unless you like super over polish it or you just misalign it terribly, broad is a pretty forgiving nib size. So as long as the pen's not too stingy, broad's going to be one of the better nibs, honestly, for a beginning writing experience if your paper can actually take it. The biggest problem you have with broad nibs is it can actually dump too much ink down for, you know, really absorbent like inkjet paper, and it can just spider out or can spread like crazy, bleed through the back, and just not look great. That's the problem more so than the pen itself. So got some options here for you. I think you're going to be set up for success. Happy writing. All right. Got a personal question. Actually, this is part personal, part business. I don't know what you want to call it. But this is from jhns.kiotms on Instagram. As someone who's converted from pen making to pen selling, I'm talking about you, Brian. Which one, in your opinion, is the best way to get into the business of pens? I heard that the owner of Carolina Pen Company and Pensler got into making pens out of learning with the lathe themselves, or you who converted into retailing. Also, second question, why did you decide retailing over pen making? Thanks a lot if you answer this. Well, you're very welcome. Yeah, so, I mean, into the business of pens, there's there's a lot of different businesses you could get into with pens. You know, there are people who are handwriting experts and their business is more in, you know, professional services for calligraphy work, you know, so they may be in the pen business, but doing it more so as a service. Or you could be a pen repair person, you could be a nibmeister, you could be a pen maker, you could be a retailer, you can be a distributor. There are lots of different kind of aspects to the pen industry, if you will. You could not even be involved in fountain pens, and you can get into art supplies or dip nibs and like all kinds of other things. So it really, I think, just depends on what business that you want to actually be in, and then recognizing what skills those require, and do those skills, are they something that you possess? Because I think that's going to be a really important part of it. Starting any business is going to be a mixture of kind of identifying your own passions and talents and your own why behind why are you looking to do it in the first place, and matching that up with the realistic opportunities that are available to you. If you want to retail like Goulet pens, we are mainly a retailer. We buy things from manufacturers and sell them to the end user, if you will, to those who are actually going to be using these things. So, you know, I would say that if that's your end goal, don't make pens first, because there's not that much knowledge that transfers over from pen making into pen retailing, to be quite honest with you. I think you'd be better off starting any other retailing business, and then there's so much to the mechanics and just the operational side of e-commerce and retailing in general that could then be applied to pen retailing, more so than pen manufacturing applies to pen retailing. That's the specific path that I took, but then I haven't always taken the easy path on the way things should be done. That's the path I took. I thought I was going to be a pen maker. I wanted to be a craftsman, very much like the way Carolina Pens, you know, Jonathan Brooks is a great dude. You know, honestly, they're just, I didn't have enough self-awareness when I was doing this I started at 23. I was 23 when I started making pens. I didn't have enough self-awareness to know as a business what it would really take to be able to do that sustainably. You know, I loved the craftsmanship aspect of it, the woodworking, making pens. You know, and ultimately this is something I recently made out of wood, right? So I'm not selling this, but you know, this is kind of where my passion was. I loved exotic woods. I loved mixing woods and resins and just kind of doing cool stuff like that. I don't really consider myself artistic. It's more about the craftsmanship, the tools that are required to work, and the actual act of making things that I really appreciate. So that I really love. That's really what got me into pens. And it wasn't so much that I really had an acumen for being a manufacturer, so to speak. So once I came to the realization that, like, you know, what it was going to take to actually be a manufacturer like Jonathan Brooks, I just realized I didn't really have what it took in me. You know, it wasn't my skill set per se. I wasn't so good at productionizing. I wasn't so good at, you know, going around doing the whole pen show thing, you know, selling kind of direct like that. It was very difficult for me to shift gears that hard. And there's so much just kind of, I don't know, there's so much to it. I didn't have enough kind of technical acumen and frankly just like mental capacity even to understand like the science behind everything that's required. Like most people that I know who are really good at pen making have some kind of like technological or engineering background, and they're really good with numbers and very good at productionizing things, because as a manufacturer, like that's where you really have sustainability, is in creating repeatable processes and having fine tolerances and not a lot of variability and stuff like that. Me, I was inspired by the handwork of being a craftsman, and all of that kind of goes away when you get into, you know, actual manufacturing as a process, as a career. Not all of it, but you know, a lot of it. And that's where it kind of got out of my skill set. So for me, I actually had an example. There weren't that many examples at the time. It was really just like Bexley and Edison were kind of the only two companies that I'd known that had started out as kind of independent, turning a pen on a lathe kind of thing, like I was doing, and then kind of took it production, right? Took it to a larger scale, got some like maybe CNC equipment and was, programming G code and stuff like that into these machines. And like, for me, that was like, oh boy, that is getting deeper into a technical area that I have no experience in, little acumen for, and it's kind of getting away from my passion that I originally had. So I was kind of like looking around like, what the heck am I going to do? And ultimately, I more or less kind of stumbled into the retailing side of things, because I originally started out making pens and it was like, oh gee, if I want to continue to make pens, I need to sell them to people, because otherwise I'm just going to be making pens and spending money on raw materials and producing things, just for myself or so my wife can have 100 pens. Like, no, I need to sell these. So it literally was like not even a thought to me before I started making pens that like, this is going to turn into a business. Didn't even think about that. It was the first day that I made pens and I was like, crap, I'm going to need to sell some pens if I want to keep doing this hobby. I'm not joking. That's how little thought out it was in the very beginning for me. So eventually, after a couple of years of trying to do the craftsman thing and sell my pens sustainably, I was never able to really pay myself for the 100% handwork that I was doing. Plus, I think I was good at making pens, but I was not at the level of like, I look at somebody like a Ryan Krusak, or even like some of the custom materials and the Urushi work that like Jonathan Brooks is doing. I didn't have that kind of acumen. I really didn't. And so I don't, just in my own self, maybe over time I could have gotten there, but it wasn't right for me at the time. We had a baby on the way. The timing didn't work out. And so, yeah, I ended up, the retailing thing kind of ended up being more the path for us. Part of that was just timing, with e-commerce kind of being where it was. This was back in 2009, 10 years ago. Very different landscape back then. There was more of an opportunity. Now, the market's a little more mature. It's a little more crowded. We're here. There's a lot of other retailers that have grown up and become very successful in the online kind of pen space. I think it's a little more difficult, to be quite honest with you. I'm not trying to just discourage you because, competition or whatever, even though there's some element of reality to that. I think just in general, there's less of a void to fill there in doing exactly what we're doing here, because we're already here and so are a bunch of other people. I think there's probably a really good space elsewhere. And honestly, over the last 6 or 7 years, I've seen people like Jonathan Brooks and a number of other, Chet Herbert and, I don't want to leave anybody out, Canalea, Sean Newton, a bunch of people, Woodshed, the bunch of Scriptorium, there's a Desiderata, a lot of them are coming to mind. Like, the thing about a lot of people that do like the pen show circuits and stuff like that, forgive me if I'm leaving anybody out, but there are a lot of kind of independent pen makers that have come up, and they're honestly, they're doing pretty good. It's like they're being successful, living in the community, making some cool stuff. It's really inspiring to see, because originally that's kind of what I wanted to do. It ended up not being right for me at that specific time, but that's where I'm seeing more people kind of coming out of nowhere and then getting into that independent pen maker, that craftsman kind of space. So that's where I see more of the opportunity, if that is within your skill set. It is difficult to manufacture pens. It is surprisingly difficult, and I've tried it. But if you can do it, it's pretty cool and it's pretty fun. You get to do some interesting stuff. So anyway, let's see here. So for me, it was really a strictly personal kind of gut decision, one that I didn't really think out well in advance. But it was a process of discovery for me. Thing is, if you want to get into really any business, if you want to do any kind of startup or entrepreneurial thing, you're going to have a vision in mind for what you want to do, but you might have to try a bunch of different things sort of related to that, see what sticks, and then pivot and adjust into where the opportunities are. Because quite frankly, you're just not going to be able to pick one thing, go down that path, and pick it accurately and be successful at it. That is incredibly difficult to do. It's basically like trying to pick winning lottery numbers. So what you got to do is, it's the whole idea of like being in the right place at the right time. I think it's more about being in the right place when the right time happens, right? You don't know when the right time is going to be, so you kind of put yourself in a place where you think you're going to end up being maybe in the right space. And then if it happens for you, great. And if it doesn't happen over a period of time, you're like, I'm really not feeling this. Like I did with the pen making thing. I was like, I'd been doing it 2.5 years, and I was like, this isn't quite working. I got to figure something else out. So I tried a little something else that really took off more, and whoosh, I went over in that way. with the retailing side of things. You might not have having that kind of thing. And then I also have the X factor, which a little behind the scenes, but I have Rachel. So Rachel, there's no way Goulet pens would have gotten off the ground without Rachel. Without her, I would just be a dreaming, pen craftsman on the balcony of our apartment, turning pens without much of a plan. So I cannot stress enough how important my wife has been to the operational and detail orientation side of what it's taken to get Goulet pens to where it is today. That's not just a compliment to her because I'm trying to flatter her. That is just cold, hard reality. I end up getting way more credit than I deserve for the success of this business because she's really the engine behind it that is making things actually work. I am usually more of like the wrecking ball that's swinging around with random ideas. It's like, maybe this could work, maybe that could work. And she's like, stop doing all this crazy stuff. It's not going to work. And then every now and then I'll come up with a really great idea that works tremendously. So she keeps me around. But anyway, I joke, but sort of not. So yes, there's that. So I think, when you're starting any kind of startup, you have to balance out dreaming and vision and, just that crazy risk-taking nature along with hardcore practicality and reality. And most people don't have all of that in one person. It's really nice when you can work as a pair like that. And Rachel and I, no doubt, that's kind of the secret to our sauce of what's happened over the last 10 years. So anyway, but I love talking about this kind of stuff. Obviously, it's taken so much like risk and gumption and grit and everything to make this business happen. So I love talking about this kind of stuff because quite honestly, it's one of those things like once you've done it, you're like, oh man, this is like one of those things. I'm going to be 90 years old in a rocking chair on my porch, Lord willing, and I'll be able to reflect back and be like, of all the things I've screwed up on my life, I definitely went for it. And I definitely did some cool stuff. Like I know I got that. And to say that is pretty dang cool. So I always want to inspire others who have kind of that little twinge, that little itch to do something like that, because it's not the kind of itch that you can scratch unless you just actually go out and do something. So, if you got that, I think there's some practical ways. You don't have to follow the exact path we did. Honestly, if I was to do the same path now, even that we did, it wouldn't work. It was very, very specifically woven and timed and happened circumstantially. But there are way more practical ways that you could do things. Like honestly, you can start selling stuff on eBay or on Etsy. You can ease into it, not have to build an entire storefront. You're going to take a little hit on your margin because you're basically paying for a marketplace store. But, if you're a pen craftsman, for example, you don't have to build your own whole custom website. You can start out and you can sell stuff on Etsy, or you can, Kickstarter's there. That you got to be a little more productionized. I wouldn't start out on Kickstarter as an independent person unless you have equipment and you really know what you're doing. You can sell stuff on eBay. You can sell stuff through your Instagram even, or on Facebook Marketplace. There's so many different ways that you can ease into it. It's so easy to get into it now. In the grand scheme of history, it's never been easier to start a business than now. But the harder part is going to be figuring out all the details and stuff like that. So if you can ease into it, outsource or bring in help in as many areas as you can so you can focus on just developing cool stuff, a cool product, cool store, whatever that might be, that would be the way to kind of ease into it. So I think that would kind of more or less cover it. And I'm going to end with one of the quotes that I really love from Zig Ziglar, who's a huge motivating dude. You can download a lot of his podcasts and stuff. He's no longer alive, but his kids have carried on his legacy. So one of his quotes that I love very much is, there's plenty of room at the top, but not enough room to sit down. So I like that. I like that a lot because it shows that like anybody can kind of make it happen, but you can't just get up there and kind of sit and rest on your laurels. You got to keep on innovating and making some cool stuff happen. All right, and then the last question that I have for this week is from a personal one from Ericun B on Instagram. Do you ever lose inspiration to write? If so, how do you get back on said horse? Who, me? Lose inspiration? Sure. I mean, it happens to everybody. I mean, geez, like listen to any great writer and they're going to tell you that like writer's block is for real. I'll preface by saying like, I'm not an actual like writer, author, like, you know, that type of thing, like Emerson or T.S. Eliot or Lewis Carroll or, you know, somebody like that who's like, you know, actually authoring things. What I do is like piddling compared to that. You know, I'm a business person, I'm a pen nerd, pen nut. I get really excited about pens, but I'm not like sitting down and writing long thoughts for like hours a day. Sometimes it's not even minutes a day. I'm jotting down notes. I'm testing out pens, a lot of pens, obviously. So for me, my interpretation of losing inspiration to write is a little different than maybe what you intended with the question. You know, so for me, it's more about like just being around pens, writing with fountain pens, being like super involved with fountain pens, because it's been my life for the last 10 years in a full-time plus capacity, right? So I've probably absorbed more than a lifetime's worth of fountain pen usage of any normal human in what I've been doing. So for me, my question is, do I ever lose inspiration just kind of like with having pens in my life or in general by doing it for 10 years? And I would say, you know, there haven't been prolonged periods of that happening, but like anything else, any other passion project that you have, if you're a musician and you practice every day and you're doing it for full time and all that, you're going to need periods where you need a kind of a mental reset, step away a little bit so that you can just kind of reframe, have something else in your life maybe going on, and then step back to it so you don't burn out. You know what I mean? And so for me, it's like being a business owner, you know, and my wife and I work together. We talk about it at dinner. We do the whole thing. Our sense of life balance is probably unique compared to most. We work together. We live, you know, very in sync lives. There's very little that we do completely separate from each other. We raise our kids together, obviously, and so it's like kids, work. That's largely what we talk about. Our home, you know, maintaining our home, our family, extended family. That's pretty much it. We don't really have a lot else going on. I do the woodworking thing. I do that, and that's kind of separate from Rachel. But you know, it's largely we're doing a lot of stuff together. So for me, the whole writing thing is I got to step away from that. I haven't really ever truly gotten sick of pens, but I've had times where there's certain been aspects of work, just in general, that I need a break from, and we'll do vacations and we'll do stuff like that, and I'll like, yeah, I'm not gonna like, you know, we went to Disney World, for example. I brought some pens. I didn't carry a pen on me as I was going around Disney World. I know it seems like scandalous, but I was like, I'm gonna be going on roller coasters and standing in the hot sun with my kids. I'm not gonna carry around a fountain pen. Like I'm gonna leave it back in the room, and I'm just gonna go, you know, so like little things like that where I'm like, in all practicality, I'm not gonna need to pull out a pen in the Magic Kingdom, right? So anyway, I did bring him to Florida, but I didn't bring him around with me in the park. So I need those little breaks and stuff like that. Using pens in my daily life, making lists, brainstorming, doodling, that kind of stuff. I'm not doing like any daily handwriting practice or daily journaling. I've kind of been doing it, but I've been getting lazy and skipping that a lot recently, personally, because that's a discipline issue for me. You know, I think it depends on what your goals are. If you want to actually produce writing, and if you're asking me like personally, like, do I ever lose inspiration to write? Like, I don't ever often have inspiration to write, to like novel and like write stories and stuff like that. I'm not a very fictional person. I'm super pragmatic, like business type oriented thinker. So I will do a lot of like mind mapping and vision setting, and I'll write out a lot of my thoughts related to the business or our family or whatever. But I'm not ever like writing a story where I need to like produce 1,000 words a day or something like that, or I've never participated in NaNoWriMo or anything like that. For me personally, that would be like just not an appealing thing to do, just personally, because it's too much for me. So no, I haven't done anything like that, but I know from those who have done that type of stuff, basically a lot of it boils down to if you lose inspiration, like tough. If you want to produce work like that, like you set a goal, you write out a certain number of words. Doesn't matter if those words are crap and absolute nothingness. You just keep writing, and that discipline of writing, eventually that will push through your writing block. You will find inspiration once you push through that. But if you abandon it, then you're going to get distracted. You're going to go and do something else. You know, writing is it's a passion, but it's also it's a chore. You know, it's a discipline. Just like anything else, just like if you're a musician, just like if you're a business person, just like if you're a parent, just like if you're trying to do any type of hobby or craft or build any type of career, you're going to have to be disciplined, even in those times where you don't feel particularly inspired. You know, that inspiration will come in breakthroughs through the discipline of practicing your craft. So it's going to ebb and flow, and you're going to have some crap that you just end up cutting out completely because it was just garbage you needed to get out. But that discipline of always doing it, that will be what pushes you through. That's the best advice that I have in that particular situation. So for me, it's like, you know, sometimes if I'm feeling, you know, bogged down at work and it's stressful and all that, I know I still got to show up and I still got to do the work. I can't just put it off because it doesn't really go away. I got to keep at it. Same kind of deal. So it may ebb and flow, but the bottom line is it's meant to be in something enjoyable and life-giving. So don't really beat yourself up if sometimes the spark dies out a little. But especially with pens and just writing in kind of this whole genre, you know, I can at least be proof that you can do something like this for 10 years and have ebbs and flows maybe in terms of your inspiration, but largely overall still love the heck out of it and still appreciate doing it every day. So hang in there, keep enjoying it, and just keep pounding it out, and don't judge yourself for how much you feel inspired on any given day. I promise it'll come back. Okay? So my question for you, related specifically to fountain pens, is what's the longest you've ever gone in between writing with a fountain pen? I've heard some crazy stories about people that like didn't use them for 50 years and then picked them back up or something. So for you, I'm curious what your story is. Maybe you just maybe you just discovered them for the first time and it's only been 3 days since you've discovered them that you've never used them. You know, I'm curious to know how long it was and what brought you back to it. Love to hear that. That kind of stuff inspires the living heck out of me. If it was any of these videos, that really fills me up. But obviously, whatever reason, you saw a friend using it, or you know, you used them as a kid, and your grandparents passed them on to you, and then you had it in a drawer for 20 years. You just saw it one day and picked it up and started using it again. Whatever. I think there's so many cool stories out there related to people's fountain pen usage. Love to hear what it's all about. You can check out a lot of the pens I talked about on gouletpens.com. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe if you haven't already. Hope you have a fantastic Memorial Day weekend. Thank you so much for watching, and write on.